As Education Minister, it was an absolute priority for me and indeed the Marshall Liberal Government to ensure standards in reading, early years literacy development were at the very forefront of our work, because of course if you as a young person, you're unable to read effectively, you're unable to access the curriculum and the broad range of opportunities that provides to a student through their primary years. If a student reaches high school without basic literacy skills, then their chances of succeeding in life are greatly less than a student who's capable of reading. Their chances of succeeding in society, of engaging in the economic state that we have, getting a job, being able to support a family, of having satisfaction in life are greatly less. Teaching a kid to read is very important. And yet, unfortunately, certainly in that period of 2015 to 2017, South Australia languished at the back of the pack when it came to reading performances measured by our NAPLAN results across Australia. There are certain factors, there are a range of factors that feed into those NAPLAN results, and it would be an optimistic government that committed to us being top of the list, given some of the economic advantages and lack of regional diversity that some jurisdictions like the ACT or Victoria have, for example. But South Australia should be shooting not just to be at the national average, but to be ahead of it, and we have been that in the past. In 2015, 2016, 2017, we were far from that. We were last or second last in almost all of the categories, bumping along at the back of the pack. Now, we thought that was a high priority to address, and it was one of the areas that the Marshall Liberal Government put significant focus on. We had a suite of measures called the Literacy Guarantee, which we undertook to deliver, and we did deliver them over the 4 years that we were in government. Indeed, we front-loaded our work and delivered many of them in 2018. The establishment of a Literacy Guarantee unit of coaches working with schools, focusing within our education department on the science of reading, understanding that measures to help our young people to read most effectively do rely on that science of reading, and a system that includes synthetics, phonics, was an important part of that. Many of our teachers across South Australia had undertaken their teacher training at a time when phonics was unfashionable or seen as unnecessary in teaching kids to read. But what we now know for absolute certain, and this is a bipartisan understanding in South Australia now, which is to the benefit of our young people and children in this state, is that while some children are able to learn to read without effective phonics instruction, students with learning difficulties, particularly dyslexia and learning difficulties of that nature, are very unlikely to learn to read successfully without being given the skills to decode those words, the construction of words and the letters formations that make the sounds of the words that then are able to be identified so that a child can get meaning out of a text. The sort of previously trendy whole language approach, where kids are taught to remember enough words and they'll sort of pick up the rest by osmosis. That works for some kids, but the kids that it doesn't work for, it leaves them condemned to not being able to successfully read or succeed in school. The former Minister, Susan Close, the Deputy Premier now, instituted a trial of a phonics check in 2017, again to her credit, and indeed it was part of the election policy that we had announced to roll that out across all schools, which we did in 2018. That phonics check was a measure, a marker, an assistance to teachers who are on the journey of phonics. But the check wasn't the point. The point was to use phonics in the classroom to teach kids how to read. And we put in place, as part of our literacy guarantee measures, significant training. We spent $13 million, I think, in our first year on TRT relief time and training for teachers who had not experienced necessarily, in many cases, the teaching of phonics, and indeed being able to conduct that first phonics check. Only just over 40% of our South Australian students were able to get to the mark in that first year in 2018. That increased dramatically in the second year, and by the third year we were over 60%, a 20% improvement in 2 years of how our Year 1 students in Term 3 of Year 1 were going and getting 28 out of 40 words correct in their phonics check. That was a dramatic improvement and shows, I think, what can be done by dedicated teachers when given the right support and resources and training. And what we have also seen in the last couple of years is some of the fastest improving NAPLAN results in Australia. Between 2017 and 2021, South Australia's NAPLAN results improved faster than any other state in the nation. And in the years ahead, we very much hope that that continues. Those measures, the literacy guarantee, the training for all teachers, the unambiguous drive of the department, the advice for schools, the literacy day in term 1, the literacy guarantee conferences in holidays. The literacy day was attended by 1,700 principals and teachers a year. The literacy conferences, hundreds of teachers through the school holidays. The phonics checks resourcing, the literacy coaches, schools adopting goals in their site improvement plans to improve the reading and writing, whole school approaches, the adoption of decodable readers in schools. These are readers, these are books designed for teaching kids to read. They are books designed understanding the stage at which a child is at in their learning to read, and therefore they are constructed with language that includes words that are capable of being understood by a child who has a phonics understanding to the level where they're supposed to be doing that reading. And this may sound like jargon to people in the chamber, but within education circles, another measure that was very important was replacing a program called Running Records, which was synonymous in many of our schools. Parents may well remember what level their child's running records were at. The problem with the Running Records program was that it was not aligned to the science of reading. It was aligned to a whole language approach, which did not take into account the levels at which children's capability of decoding the words were relevant. And so Running Records was essentially setting targets for children to reach a certain level that were not related to that child's capacity to read. And I think driving energy and work within our classrooms towards an end that wasn't actually the best practice in supporting children to read. But education systems like to have a measure. And indeed, the way that schools are funded has classroom participation and reading taken into account. And so Running Records being removed completely, as it was for the first time in 2020 during the pandemic, it couldn't be left in a vacuum. So a new system called DIBELS has been put in place. And I think that work to bring that American system into an Australian context effectively is continuing in the Education Department. I give the departments and I give the Minister credit for continuing that work. I give him credit and the government credit for continuing the phonics checks and the literacy guarantee unit. But I do have some reservations, Madam Acting Deputy Speaker, about the way that the government is conducting its work, and I'm concerned that literacy is not the priority that it once was. The government is right to talk about wellbeing. We talked about wellbeing, and we introduced new wellbeing resources, and the government has continued to introduce those resources and extended it somewhat. But those new wellbeing resources provided to schools should not be seen as a signal that standards and basic literacy aren't still incredibly important, because without those skills, students are doomed not to succeed. The inability to read is pretty much a guarantee of poor well-being. So the idea, as was sometimes presented, that the department or the former government were focusing too much on literacy, too much on those basic skills and not enough on well-being, I always saw it as a false contest, because they go hand in hand. Without basic skills, you might make a child feel better for a day if they're not enjoying their focus on literacy that day, but they're not going to succeed later in their schooling, and then well-being is going to be shot later in their schooling if you haven't succeeded in their literacy instruction. It concerns me that I understand the Literacy Day this year has been cancelled. It concerns me when I hear reports from time to time of schools or teachers feeling that the focus on literacy has been withdrawn, and I urge the Minister to do whatever it takes to ensure that literacy remains a consistent push for the Education Department, because when those NAPLAN reports come in, the purpose of education is not to get good NAPLAN results, but NAPLAN results are as useful an indicator as any of how our system is going compared to other systems around Australia. And there's every reason to think that we should continue to improve as a state in how our results are going in NAPLAN, because what we saw was dramatic improvement in the last couple of NAPLANs in our Year 3s. Those same Year 3s who were the first couple of cohorts to go through their Year 1 phonics check, to benefit from the improved instruction in those early years, the improved resources that our teachers had at their disposal in the first couple of years of primary school. And just as those year threes are moving through the system, so they become year fives. Last year we saw year five reading results going up, for example. Not surprising, that was the first cohort that did the phonics check. And this year's year fives will also have been an early cohort that did the phonics check. Those kids will be getting to year 7 and year 9 in due course. And if they've been successful through their primary years as a result of a higher percentage being able to effectively understand what they're learning, higher percentage being able to learn to read, there is every opportunity for this government to see those NAPLAN results improve. And indeed, I'm sure they'll claim the credit for it, and that would be great, and we'll be fine. We'll be happy to give the credit because we're on Team South Australia. We want our kids to do well, and those NAPLAN results will be a sign of success for our state. Had a long way to come from those results in 2016, and we want to see them improving. But I do say this to the government. They can't just assume that as a result of some reforms undertaken in 2018, with some extra wellbeing measures in place, everything's going to keep getting better. It requires relentless pursuit of excellence, and standards are important in that. It requires a focus to be continued, and I urge the Minister to continue to do so.